We return once more to a world where superpowers are commonplace and children go to trade schools to learn to be superheroes. Our protagonist Midoriya Izuku has just healed from breaking his legs to save his own personal hero and master, All Might, from the clutches of the League of Villains. He and his classmates just survived an almost deadly ambush on their own campus, but managed to last long enough for the other teachers to arrive and help. We join them a few days later, back in the classroom, to find that it's time to prepare for their school's yearly sports festival. Us, YouTube, it's time once again to dive into the world of My Hero Academia. It may have took me longer to get back to this than expected, but we're still trucking along. If I were to talk about the things currently happening in the manga, man, things are heating up. It's been a few weeks since I wrote that line, but I'm still probably right, it's fine. But we're not here to talk about that, so let's pick off where we last left off. We were all the way back in chapter 22, and we'll be ending at... Give me a minute, I'm writing things out as I go along this time. Chapter 69! Buckle up, we'll be talking about the sports festival, the hero killer arc, and the term's final exams. There is no wall too high to climb. This is My Hero Academia, Rising. Before we can learn about the sports festival, the teachers have a talk about the events that just went down at USJ. The police captured over 70 villains on the site, but the two in charge, Shigaraki and Kurohige, managed to escape. They tried to analyze Shigaraki since he was the one in charge and concluded that he's a bit of a man-child. His half-baked ideologies, taunting with his Nomu monsters, and erratic behavior signal all of this. But what does that matter, they ask? And Detective Tsukauchi surmises that, with villains being beaten down as hard as they are normally, they're attracted to a more simple form of evil. But this just swings back around to the thought of people not knowing what to do with themselves, and how with proper guidance, even someone as warped as Shigaraki has the potential to grow. Back with the kids, some ask why they would even hold a sports festival. Eraser tells them that it's to prove that the last attack was a fluke, and that they would be beefing up security this time around. Some still worried, it's reiterated how highly regarded the UA Sports Festival is held. For the island nation of Japan, it's an event that eclipses even the Olympics. That mass visitation includes a gathering of many pro heroes to scout students and check for future prospects for sidekicks. Honestly, when put like that, it should be one of the safest places in Japan. The kids are rightfully fired up again, but Uraraka seems a bit unusually motivated. She tells Deku and Ida that one of her motivations for being a hero is to make a lot of money for her parents so they can have an easy life from their construction job that isn't going too well. Both Deku and Ida admire her motivations, even if she thinks her own goals don't match up to the other two's altruism. Deku then gets invited out to lunch by All Might. Ooh, is that joke kosher? He made it, it's fine. With the sports festival coming up, they need to talk about both of their power outputs. All Might can only transform for about 50 minutes a day now, and Deku on the other hand, while he still broke his legs, he managed to hit a Nomu without breaking his arm. The boy surmises that it's probably because he was hitting a person. While not concrete, this is still progress, so All Might tells him to keep moving forward, and to tell the world that he is here at the sports festival. Deku can't really wrap his mind around why he'd do that because he already has All Might as his own personal mentor, but the man wants him to dig deep and understand the drive to aim for the top. Back at the classroom, some kids have gathered to take a look at Class 1A. One of the general education kids calls them out about how the sports festival is a chance for people to be shuffled around in their classes, and even someone from 1B comes to declare war on our villain survivalists. Bakugo, persistent as always, rudely brushes them off and saying that their goading doesn't matter because he's aiming for the top no matter what. After a quick montage page, the event is here. Reporters and professionals from all over have gathered to watch the would-be heroes. Normally the third years would take the top spot of viewers, but with 1A having a class that fought off villains, the first years are getting a little extra attention. In the locker room before the event, Todoroki calls out Deku and his relationship to All Might. He says that he's better than him in all rights, but he'll personally bring down our green-haired protagonist. After looking back on how determined everyone has been before the festival, Deku admits that Todoroki is better than him, but he isn't going to back down. What a nice little set of breathing chapters that was. We get a bit of world building, some character writing, and a bit of intrigue. We get a bit of rumination on Shigaraki and learn about the sports festival's place in a world full of superpowers at the country's most prestigious school. Which begs the question, would the Olympics even allow quirk use? For some reason, I couldn't imagine that it would. Even more than that, The Olympics location works on rotation, so having a yearly event to see the best up-and-coming heroes of your own nation would be a treat all on its own. Then Ochako gets a bit of writing to her. It's interesting to see how she's pretty much as selfless as our other characters, but she doesn't see it that way. Before she wanted to be a hero, she just wanted to help her family out with her quirk, but they told her to follow her own dreams. This also reinforces some lines of work-related quirk use, world building, small in-between-the-lines stuff. And as for Deku, he tries to live up to his master, both physically and mentally. It's funny how the story points out that Deku might have not broken his arm because he was hitting a person, but not bring up the shock nullification, at least a bit. Personally, I'm fine with a bit of show don't tell for small things like this because I believe it was a mix of both, but some people might say it's a bit too subtle. On an internal note, in this world of hero commercialism, he has to become comfortable with competing just a bit with his peers to truly aim for the spot of number one, and doing anything less would be seen as looking down on them. And with that done, let the competitions begin. The classes enter the stadium a little intimidated by the large crowd, but saving people while others are watching is a natural thing they'd have to get used to sooner or later. Aizawa and Present Micah are MCs, while the R-rated 18+ hero Midnight is our ref. However, before the festivities can start, the Year 1 representative needs to give a few words. Having gotten first in the school's hero entrance exams, it's up to Bakugo to make the speech. His inspiring words are that he'll be using everyone else as stepping stones for his victory. Obviously the students aren't pleased, but Deku can tell that it's not just bluster. The boy is putting himself in a corner to live up to his own hype, as opposed to blindly believing in it like before. Still a punk brat though. With everything laid out, the only thing left is to reveal the first event, an obstacle course race. The race quickly begins, and it seems that the starting line is our first real obstacle, but it's a simple matter for our half-and-half boy Todoroki to deal with. He manages to freeze a lot of students in place, but as expected, his own class manages to dodge the attack. What wasn't expected were our first real obstacles, the zero-pointer robots from the entrance exams. Yet once again, even though he never went up against one of them before, these metal titans are still no match for Todoroki. He freezes one just in the right moment to make his way through and fall and block the other's paths once again. This isn't enough to stop some students, and we get more info on some of their quirks like Sero's tape and Tokoyami's dark shadow as they follow Bakugo's leads to go over the colossal bots. The falling titans may have actually hurt someone, but it's not enough to stop the hardened Kirishima in the steely Tetsu 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 Tetsu. As for everyone else, they're slowly fending off the smaller bots until Yaoyorozu easily clears a path by herself. 1A leads the pack with their villain experience, but almost everyone comes to a halt at the second obstacle, tightrope walking over a chasm. This school has to be the size of a small town. Bakugo may be catching up with Todoroki, but the standout for this problem is someone from the support course. The hero course kids aren't allowed to use their costumes normally for these games, but as long as the support kids have made their own equipment, they're allowed to use them, all in the sake of fairness. Though when the crowd starts murmuring about Todoroki being the son of the number 2 hero and his high pedigree, it stops feeling like it is. We come up to the final stretch and our last obstacle is a minefield. The explosions aren't enough to kill, but they do make me question how they got any of this past the PTA. And speaking of getting past, this type of trouble is perfect for Bakugo to catch up to Todoroki. It's a fight for first place, but you may be asking, where's our protagonist? Well, Deku's having a bit of a hard time trying not to use his quirk. He managed to take out some of the smaller robots with a metal plate, and he crawled his way through the tight ropes, but he's fairly far behind first place by the time he gets to the third obstacle. He has to think on his feet, and the plan he comes up with is just crazy. He piled up a bunch of mines and blasted his ass in the first place, but Todoroki and Bakugo won't just let him slip by, but he won't let them just pass him either. He swings the plate down and sets off another explosion and books it past the finish line, winning the race. He looks up to the stands and gives All Might a winner's smile. All Might is pleased that the boy managed to stand out like he wanted. He misjudged Midoriya, thinking that he wouldn't be able to stand on top of his peers, but everything turned out just fine. And you can't really blame All Might for thinking that. From the audience perspective, we've seen Deku stand up for himself, but in this pure competitive setting where winning is only for your own self-satisfaction, it's a bit of growth from the slight lack of enthusiasm he had beforehand. As for the first event itself, it was pretty fun to see a bit more of our cast. Lots of characters got to stand out and flesh out their abilities. There's also a bunch of little foreshadowing panels and lines tossed about for good measure as well. It was also a creative way to get Deku by without using one for all. The other students pour in with congratulations and self-reflections about, with 42 qualifying students, our second round can begin. It's media's sports festival pastime, the Cavalry Battle. 3 people work together to form a base, the horse, and the rider goes after the enemy's headbands. Because this is a free-for-all, each participant has a point value, lowest starting at 5 and increasing by 5 as it goes up. However, first place gets a special whopping 10 million points. Points are combined and you can fall, lose, and regain as many points as you want until the end of 15 minutes. It's up to the students to form their own teams and combine their abilities that have the highest value by the end of the match. We make a quick cutaway to explain once again that standing out from your peers is necessary, but what is also necessary is working together with them. The students delegate amongst themselves. Bakugo stands out by being a good partner to have, but falls apart when dealing with other people. Luckily, Kirishima is tough enough and straightforward enough to get him in gear. Deku, on the other hand, is being avoided like a liability. Too many points in a risky/unknown quirk are holding him back, but he is also saved by friendship in the form of Uraraka, who believes in his abilities and wants to join up with her friends. And speaking of friends, Deku's perfect team composition includes her and Ida, who he tries to recruit, but the class president declines. He respects Midoriya greatly, but it's because of that admiration he joins Todoroki's team for the chance to challenge his friend. Deku once again realizes that everyone is his enemy for these games, but is saved by the support course girl we saw during the race. She wants to stand out, so she decided to try and join Deku's team. Uraraka is a bit put off by the sudden forwardness, and is then put off by being completely ignored. I wonder if this is the start of something. Anyway, we got 3 of our 4 max limit and Midoriya has a last minute pick in mind. With time up, the match begins. Our team is Deku, Uraraka, Hatsume, and Tokoyami. For just a single chapter, there's a lot of character writing crammed in here. From Bakugo and Kirishima to Deku and Ida, everyone is shown who they're comfortable with and who they want to challenge to prove themselves. It's great all around for just a bunch of talking. As the match begins, we peek in on Team Todoroki. He picked Kaminari and Yaoyorozu for their defense and for Yaoyorozu to keep them safe from Kaminari's attacks. Ida for his mobility and sturdy body, and he'll be taking point and attacking himself, but clarifies that he won't be using the fire half in battle while glaring at his father in the stands. The match quickly gets underway and Deku is clearly the first target. Combining Hatsume's items and Uraraka's weightless quirk, they take their escape to the skies. When still pursued in the air, Tokoyami uses his dark shadow to cover their backs. They put up a good game of cat and mouse, dodging teams like Soji, Mineta, and Tsuyu, and even taking a hit from Bakugo. But while everyone is focused on first place, halfway into the match, our announcers notice that a lot of Class A's team have lost their headbands, mostly to a member of Class B, Monoma. The boy smugly claims that if this many people were going to move up to the next round, it would have been better to hold back and attack during the second. He's clearly provoking Bakugo and rubs salt in the wound by bringing up the sludge villain from last year. Bakugo aggressively changes targets, and Deku finally runs into Team Todoroki. The 2 teams are still surrounded, but with the help of Kaminari and Yaoyorozu, he zaps the onlookers and then freezes them in place to get a bit of point insurance. The 2 teams clash for a bit while Team Midoriya is at a disadvantage because Dark Shadow's weakness to light from Kaminari's attacks, but Team Todoroki doesn't know that, so it's time to fake it until they make it to the end. Todoroki encloses the 2 teams to make it an easy one-on-one, but he still can't manage to make the steal for 5 more minutes. Deku figured out his weakness of not using his fire side and keeps his position in his weak spot between his right hand and Ida. However, Ida is the one to break this stalemate. He uses his secret move. The Recupero bursts the blast past Midoriya, allowing Todoroki to steal their headband. The move lets him become faster than normal, but his engines stall out, leaving him defenseless. Time's running out, but while Tokoyami may want to go after easier targets, Deku tells them that they have no idea how the points are split up and they can only go for Todoroki. Believing in him, Uraraka is the one that pushes the team towards confrontation, and her tenacity reminds Deku that he has to get those points back for the rest of his team as well. He gets serious and activates One for All, and spooks Todoroki enough to unconsciously activate his fire side. On the other side of the wall, however, Bakugo is still gunning for Monoma. The boy has a copy quirk that caught the team off guard, and being interfered with by others wasn't helping either. After he'd gathered himself, Bakugo launches another attack and manages to steal enough points back to end them up in the top 4, but he won't be finished until he gets the original points that were stolen from him. He's finally figured out his team's quirks and combines all of them well enough to get everything back that Monoma has taken from them. Back with Deku, the boy does his best to not break his hand, and he manages to defend himself doing just that. He creates an opening and manages to get a headband, but is miscalculated and grabbed the wrong one. 10 seconds left, and in the final scramble, no one else is hardly able to make a move. With time up, our 3 leading students all have a look of disappointment on their faces. The smuggest of all the students seems to be General Ed's Shinso, who'd been running around for 0 points for most of the match. His team miraculously got 3rd place by the end of it all. As for 4th place, Deku is ready to apologize to his team, but it isn't needed because in the last 10 seconds, Tokoyami was able to grab Todoroki's own headband, putting them in 4th place. With this, we have all of our participants for the final event. Once again, everyone is left to ruminate on their own performance. It's a mixture of slight inadequacies and frustration at sudden reveals. Todoroki seems the most bothered by just using his left side to attack someone. And that's our cavalry battle. Fun, wasn't it? More quirks, higher tension, and people making good on their promises of battle. Well, most of them. I like that this time, however, the difference between 1A and the other students isn't their life experience, it's battle tenacity, and Monoma clearly underestimated Bakugo while everyone else managed to give each other a little push that they needed to do their best, whether they were on the same team or not. It's time to break for lunch and most people are planning to grab a bite, but others have words to chew on instead. Todoroki calls out Deku and tells him that he felt the same pressure from him as he did when All Might fought at USJ. He cuts to the chase and asks Midoriya if he's the illegitimate child of All Might. In this world, that's the most natural conclusion to come to. Midoriya tells him that isn't it, and that's enough for Todoroki to understand that the two share some sort of secret relationship, and that's more than enough for him. As the son of the number 2 hero in Japan, someone being connected to the number 1 hero means that there's a worth in beating him. Elsewhere, All Might is having a chat with Mr. Number 2 himself, but he doesn't seem pleased to meet him. All Might tries to ask for advice in teaching kids, but Endeavor has no interest. The only words he passes along are that he's created his son for the sole purpose of overtaking All Might. Todoroki is the one that gives us more clarification. It seems that the practice of quirk marriage was something people did to create powerful offspring. Endeavor used his prestige to get to Todoroki's mother to have a child that could surpass All Might. The thing Todoroki remembers the most from his childhood is his mother's crying face, and the act of pouring scalding water on his left side of his face that resembles his father's. He's made a vow to get back at his father for how he abused his mother by attaining the number 1 spot while not using his fire powers. Beating someone related to All Might is just a stepping stone on his path of revenge. Deku is left speechless at such a devastating story. Even an eavesdropping Bakugo is left somber. The only thing the boy can do is give his own circumstances of how he wouldn't be where he was without the help of others. And even though Todoroki's story was a lot, he's still going to be the one to win. Back with the other kids, the girls seem to have fallen for a prank that was being set up in the background of our slip into depression. But more importantly, it's time to find out what our next event is, and it's a simple 1v1 battle tournament. But just as our students were about to pick lotteries for their placement, Ojiro has an announcement to make. He plans to drop out of the tournament because he can't seem to remember what happened near the end of the Cavalry Battle. The others tell him not to worry about this, but his pride won't let this go. A Class B kid also feels the same way and backs out as well. Aoyama decides to stay in, and through some quick delegation, it's decided that Tetsu and Chiozaki will be the ones to take their place. With that over, the lots are picked and our first match is Midoriya versus the mysterious Shinso. Our combatants do their best to prep for battle in their own ways, and at the end of it all Might comes to give Deku a pep talk. They talk about how amazing it is that he's gotten this far, but even at his best he's only able to use 5% without hurting himself, and even that's like fighting on a tightrope. The boy's worried, but once again All Might reassures him that everything up until now has been built on his hard work. In times of distress, it's best just to put on a smile and give it your best shot. Before we get to the festivities, let's talk about what just happened. The story took a sharp turn that's been teased a lot up until now with Todoroki's backstory. The juxtaposition between his sad tale and the kids just resting and doing their own things highlight how this boy's been keeping his feelings all to himself. He knows he's being selfish and even apologizes for taking up Midoriya's time, but everyone's being a little selfish, right? Ojiro and the other boys set out for their own reasons, and this just goes to show the difference in the characters who all aim for the same goal. It also seems like the stress of putting on their best is catching up with some of them. But the show must go on, and it's time to start round 1, Midoriya versus Shinso. Immobilize the enemy, push them out of bounds, or get them to say they give up. Other than killing your opponent, anything goes. The match begins, and the first one to come out swinging is Shinso. Those pre-game taunts were all given to shake up our protagonist. We come to find out Shinso's quirk is brainwashing. He can willingly control anyone who verbally responds to him. He can't make them speak, but he can control their actions and orders Deku to leave the stage. President Might calls out how powerful this ability is, and Aizawa brings up how impractical the school's entrance exam is. It lets people with non-combative focused quirks slip through the cracks and waste their potential. Our protagonist is feeling a lot of regret right now, especially after Ojiro warned him and asked him to take the win, but as he approaches the ring line, he peers into the doorway and sees 8 set of eyes looking back at him. His quirk starts to activate, and he gains a bit of movement back in his fingers and fires off a large wind blast. That pain is more than enough to wake him up out of his hypnosis. He won't speak a second time, even if Shinso says a bunch of stuff that hits really close to home for him. Combining everything he's done since he's first gotten into school, he manages to toss Shinso out of bounds and wins the round. The sunken-eyed boy lays in defeat and thinks back to how everyone assumes that with a quirk like his, it wouldn't be a surprise for the person to turn out malicious. He himself couldn't blame them for thinking that, but even so, his dream was to always be a hero. It seems those feelings managed to reach the people in the stands who praise him and his quirk. He swears that he'll make his way to the hero course and he'll outshine everyone there. In the recovery room, Midoriya tells All Might about his vision. All Might says that it was proof that he's gained more control of his power. The Force Ghost can't control him, so winning the match was something he's done with his own abilities. Much like Deku, I'm not fully convinced, but the standout point was that someone that looked like All Might was also there, and just between the man and recovery girl, that's just fine. We catch up with Shoto before his match, and his dear old dad has some words of encouragement for him. They aren't particularly good, but he gives them anyway. Look at that face. You can almost say that they worked anyway. It's Todoroki versus Sero, and while the tape boy knows he's outmatched, he comes out roll spinning anyway. Sadly, Todoroki isn't in the mood to play at all and goes all out to win the match in one devastating move. With the match over, the crowd can only chant "Don't mind" as Todoroki solemnly melts his own ice. Next round is Kaminari versus Shiozaki, and just like a bolt of lightning, Kaminari loses in a flash. In the stands, Deku is furiously taking notes to prep for future battles, and Uraraka is reminded once again how great she thinks the boy is, but unlike the Cavalry Battle, this doesn't seem to be reassuring. Next is Ida versus Hatsume, but one seems to be over-equipped. Ida is wearing a bunch of support gear he got from Hatsume herself as a show of fair sportsmanship, and as dubious as that sounds, Midnight allows it because of the boy's earnestness. However, the boy's feelings are just playthings to the girl in question. She uses him to demonstrate her gear to the watching sports company businessmen that are in the crowd. For 10 minutes, this boy is run around the palm of this girl's hands. And with her work done, Mei steps out of the ring herself, satisfied. Ida isn't the winner, but he moves on to the next round. Up next is Ishido versus Aoyama, but the story doesn't have time for that. Uraraka has to prepare for her battle and the nerves are getting to her. She's just about to say something to Ida, but Deku barges in telling them that 2 rounds have already gone by. Ishido makes short work of Aoyama, and Tokoyami has done the same for Yaoyorozu. Kirishima and Tetsutetsu are currently battling it out, meaning Uraraka has to face Bakugo next. Deku's come up with the battle strategy for one of his longest supporters, but the girl declines. She admits that she felt a bit embarrassed at relying on him for the Cavalry Battle when Ida went out of his way to challenge the boy. The fight is her challenge, so she will do it on her own and vows to meet the boy in the finals with a shaky smile and a thumbs up. The crowd waits in anticipation for what appears to be a one-sided matchup. The match begins, and the first one out of the gate is Ochako. She remembers Bakugo's starting habit but isn't fast enough to capitalize on it, but that first attack is enough to set up a feint. That, however, doesn't manage to close the physical gap between them. Even if Bakugo takes a defensive stance, Ochako doesn't have enough physical skill or strength to overwhelm him and get that one touch in that might give her the chance of victory. She gets rolled over enough that the crowd starts to boo Bakugo, only for Aizawa to start criticizing them for their lack of perception. Bakugo chose the safest tactic to win this match. He isn't playing around with her. And it's that seriousness that allows her to use a secret move. Because of her low stance, he wasn't able to take notice of the debris that have been floating around the arena. She makes them all fall, ready to seize the opening to attack, but Bakugo has an answer for this as well. It was close, but now that he's done that, Bakugo is eager to get back into it. However, Ochako has reached her weight limit, and she can no longer move. Bakugo is the winner. Ochako is carried off to the recovery room as Bakugo makes his way back to the stands where he runs into Deku. Bakugo calls the boy out for giving Uraraka an annoying self-sacrificing move that reminded him of the freckled boy, but Deku clarifies that Uraraka was the one who came up with that plan all on her own, and he should be giving her credit for giving him a tough time. Back with his classmates, Bakugo gets heckled for playing the perfect little heel role of beating up a fragile little girl, but shoots back that there's nothing fragile about her. Back in the waiting room, Deku runs into Ochako, who seems frustrated about her loss but eager to do better next time. It's very awkward between the two of them. Before they can really say anything, it's time for Deku's match. The girl wishes the boy luck as she answers a missed call as he leaves. It was her dad calling to congratulate her on the match, but she doesn't see much to praise at all. She wants to do her best as fast as she can to fulfill her dream, and her father reassures her that she doesn't need the rush and she'll be a great hero one day. Deku overhears the girl crying and can only feel frustrated that he couldn't do anything for her, even though she pushed all of her feelings aside to push him on. And that was the first match that had a lot of meat to its bones. So I think the most interesting about this match is how much Deku is a player in it for not being there at all. Ochako and Bakugo only know as much of each other's fighting styles and tactics by relating it back to the boy. You know, preparing for the starting right swing or watching out for an unexpected sneak attack. Ochako has her own dreams and ambitions, but much like how Deku's vision of victory is Bakugo, for Ochako it seems hers is of Deku. As for Bakugo, even though he can relate almost all of Uraraka's actions back to his childhood friend, he gets excited by them. He respects them, at least enough to call his opponent by name, something he's only done once this arc for one other classmate. It's only when he sees the boy in question that the idea of it starts pissing him off, but being told that it wasn't Deku's direct influence leaves him subdued. But we move on. It's time for the second round to begin. Or it would be if Endeavor didn't have a few words to share. Much like his son, he noticed Deku's similarities to All Might and is also excited for the boy to be a good stepping stone. Seeing the man's ego firsthand, Deku can't help but call him out on his ambition. He tells the number 2 hero that he's no more All Might as Shoto is him, and the two finally meet, and it's time for Midoriya vs Todoroki. Both boys start off strong with Deku flicking back ice with a 100% finger flick. He doesn't know how hard Todoroki will be coming at him, so he can't afford to hold back. Because the Icy Boy's actions have all been big, he doesn't know everything that could be thrown at him, so he has to figure out a plan while he still has fingers left to use. Todoroki doesn't let up. He keeps slowly pushing the boy back until he's forced to use his other arm to blow back ice that had crept up too far. Deku notices that stalling for time is starting to work a little, but the difference in training, quirk control, and damage is getting to him. Todoroki on the other hand sees this battle as over. Deku hasn't even touched him yet and both of his arms are beaten up. Add that with his father's disappointment and the heated Ice Boy feels satisfied. But that satisfaction just frustrates Deku, who fires off another flick with his already broken fingers. Even though Deku has pushed past his limits, he also throws those limits back at Todoroki. Quirks are physical abilities. Just like how you strain your muscles or you can run out of breath, you have a limit on how much you can do at once. But even though Todoroki has started to frost over, he could easily deal with that limitation by using his fire side. Deku can't stand the idea of him coming out on top when everyone else is doing their best. Deku may be all beaten up, but Todoroki still hasn't managed to land a hit on him yet. He yells for the boy to come at him with everything he's got. Todoroki doesn't understand what would get the boy to go so far to break his bones anymore and can only think that it has something to do with his dad. He rushes in, but because of his frost he can't move as fast and it's slow enough for Deku to dodge and get in some powered down hits of his own. The Freckle Boy's spirit, hero declaration, and shout of his power being his own starts to stir up memories within Todoroki. He starts to remember his time with his mother and how his father's obsession pushed her to her breaking point. But he's still able to remember the special time they spent together, and it's alright for him to still want to be a hero despite his father. How his blood doesn't define him, but he defines who he wants to be. Finally able to remember his mother's reassuring words, he explodes in flames, using his fire consciously in battle for the first time. Endeavor, blissfully unaware, is delighted, but All Might was able to recognize his pupil's efforts to literally light a fire in his opponent. Todoroki still doesn't get why Deku tried so hard to bring this out of him, but he's grateful nonetheless. The two charge up for their final attack. Midnight and Cementos decide that the two have pushed themselves too far, but it's too late to completely stop their clash. The two blows cause a massive air explosion of heat that destroys the arena, and as the smoke clears, we see Deku has been sent out of the ring. The winner is Todoroki. As Todoroki leaves the arena, he runs into his father, who is proud that his son has put his problems aside and started using his fire. Todoroki tells him that there's no way it's as simple as that. and that in the moment he was able to forget about his father. Whether that's a good or a bad thing is something for him to work out. Deku, on the other hand, is in a pretty bad condition. Recovery Girl once again admonishes All Might for the boy's reckless behavior. A group of his friends manage to come and visit, and he wakes up just enough to talk to them, but they're shocked to hear that he'll have to go through surgery before he can be healed properly. As they're distracted, the boy apologizes to All Might. Because he wanted to help Todoroki, he couldn't live up to the man's expectations. All Might tells him that losing is a shame, but giving help when it isn't asked for is part of what makes someone a true hero. And with that said, we finished the climax of this arc. Lots of things went into this fight, from feelings to tactics to fleshing out the world just a little bit more once again. Quirks become a bit more defined, even if some of them slip outside of those defined parameters, but that's how almost any power set works. It's fun. I skipped over them, but there's a good flow between fighting and cutaways to give us more context on what's happening or what the crowd is currently thinking. One of my favorite cuts is to Aizawa, who understands that Deku is currently doing the best he can to fight, and it focuses on his own broken arms, while thinking that even if he can just get healed up later, he's still choosing to break them. Todoroki's backstory is concise and focused. It goes in an order that we assume Todoroki remembers constantly about how everything led up to one another, but is blown away by the one good one at the end. But even in those bad ones, he still remembers that he wants to be a hero himself. The final little touch for me is the line, "Come at me with everything you got." The Japanese language puts a lot of focus on shared context. This allows you to play with the subject in a sentence. In the final class, Deku thinks about these words for himself, while Todoroki remembers those same words from earlier. It stands out here with the bubble being bolded by the memory highlight, but the text matches Deku's current thoughts. I think it plays out especially well in the anime. I honestly can't think of a way to translate this into English without it sounding a bit clumsy. But as nice as I think this sounds, you aren't really losing anything from not knowing it. But on with the story, the boy finishes his surgery, gets his boo-boo smooches, and is sent on his way to watch the rest of the tournament. His hand's looking pretty banged up. He's lucky it still works like normal. Recovery Girl gave him an ultimatum. Figure something out so he stops breaking them, or she'll stop healing him altogether. As All Might walks Deku back to the stands, the boy starts to feel self-doubt creep back in. He's reminded once again that he's surrounded by extraordinary people, and if All Might came to this school to find them, he kinda scraped the bottom of the barrel with him. All Might does agree that if he gave One for All to someone like Todoroki, he'd practically be an unstoppable superhero. But he chose Midoriya because he reminded him of himself. He too was born quirkless. His own master had a quirk, but Japanese is also not big on third-person pronouns. All Might's master still believed in him, and he believes that there's something special about Deku, even if he was quirkless. He surpassed all of his expectations so far already. The two split as Deku watches Bakugo and Kirishima go at it. He missed 2 matches and runs into one of the winners, Ida. The class president is happy for his friend's recovery, and Deku asks if the boy's brother has called him. He did, but Ida's hoping he can report back with his overall victory of the tournament. Bakugo figures out a way to cut through Kirishima's defense and manages to gain his spot in the final 4 along with Ida, Tokoyami, and Todoroki. The second to last sets can begin. The start of round 3 is Ida versus Todoroki. Ida knows he can't have a drawn-out fight, so he gets started with a standing long jump to dodge Todoroki's ice and lands a solid kick. He rushes to the edge of the ring, but he suddenly stalls out. Todoroki managed to clog up his exhaust pipes with ice and then gets the rest of his body. It seems today's matches were enough for him to devise a plan even if he couldn't figure out a way to dodge the kick. As Ida is in remorse, we cut over to the city of Hosu. We see the body of someone in a familiar hero costume as we read the call from the other end of their phone requesting for backup. The blood-covered phone has a message from Tinya as a deranged hero killer stands over the body, criticizing heroes who want nothing more than fame and money, declaring that the only person who can kill him is All Might. We cut back to the action and it's Bakugo versus Tokoyami. The powerful shadow user is having a hard time and his past combatants are a bit frustrated about it. Only Deku and Ochako know how much of a bad matchup this is for their former partner. He tries his best to win without his weakness being exploited, but after enough attacks, Bakugo picks up on his advantage and capitalizes on it. Bakugo is the winner and the finals are Bakugo versus Todoroki. Meanwhile, in the stands, Ida gets a call about the attack that just happened to his brother, and we cut back to the crime scene to see the attacker be approached by Kurogiri from the League of Villains. We return to the stadium to find Bakugo mixing up his rooms and running into Todoroki. It's awkward, but the blonde at least wants his own declaration of war. Todoroki, on the other hand, can't forget his match with Midoriya and asks Bakugo about the boy's invasiveness. Bakugo is more than aware of the boy's pushy nature, and it just frustrates him that it's interfering with this fight between them. He tells Todoroki that he doesn't care about his problems with Deku or his family, and to come at him seriously. The match swiftly gets underway and Todoroki once again launches off a large first attack, but Bakugo managed to counter it. He surmised that if the boy is going to go all out like this, getting close would be his best option and outmaneuvers his clumsy attacks. He moves in close enough to be grabbed by the boy's left hand, but Todoroki refuses to attack with his flames even if that's what Bakugo was aiming for. The boy is left aggravated, but it's different than his childhood friend. Bakugo calls out Todoroki on not being serious, and about how if he can't do better than Deku, then this doesn't matter. How he made a declaration to get an indisputable first place. Bakugo prepares his last attack while Todoroki is lost in thought. Deku does his best to cheer on the boy, and Bakugo is all for it if it gives him the fight he's looking for, and Todoroki is almost motivated enough to use his left side, but he seems to still be held back by his father and extinguishes his flames at the last second. Bakugo unleashes his ultimate attack and blows Todoroki out of the ring. The boy can't believe it. He can't accept that he won like that, but before he can get his point across, Midnight puts him to sleep. Bakugo is the final winner. The awards ceremony starts quickly and there's an appearance of All Might for everyone to enjoy. He hands out medals and words of encouragement to our top 3 participants. Ida is missing because of his brother, and Bakugo is dissatisfied with his victory. All Might commends all of the students on their hard work and gives a scuffed send-off. The kids return to their class to get ready for their break. Ida finally meets his brother who apologizes for his defeat, and Todoroki decides that it's time he went and faced his mother. Ochako is visited by her parents and Deku contemplates his quirk while spending time with his mom. And with that, we covered the sports festival. You know, when writing this arc, Horikoshi thought it would be way shorter, like at least 10 chapters long. I also thought the same when I covered this. But what an arc, right? Action, drama, camaraderie, and sportsmanship all rolled into one. More characters get highlighted, ones we know get fleshed out, and everyone goes through a bunch of shared trials. The different events allow our characters to show off their quirks in creative ways outside of straight combat and synergize with each other. We get to see more about how the school works with the general ed, support, and slight cameo of the business classes. We don't talk about them. And all of the dynamic art and facial expressions are a feast for the eyes. A good old-fashioned tournament arc is always a welcome cliche, and this one ends on a more bittersweet note, but all of our heroes have a new goal facing forward, and it's forward we shall follow. The children's 2-day break is over in a flash, and on his way back to school, Midoriya faces his first trial. Unwanted social interactions. Exhausted, he runs into Ida at the front gates, and on this rainy day, he tries to bring up the boy's older brother, but is told that there's nothing to worry about any longer. Midoriya can only silently stare at his friend's retreating form. In class, we learn that Deku wasn't the only one to get celebrated treatment. The kids can't believe how many people watched the sports festival. Aizawa arrives fully healed and ready to get the class started. They have a special hero informatics class. It's finally time for them to choose their hero names. This is all to set up for their work studies with the pros. Hero agencies sent in requests to students if they found them impressive during the sports festival in hopes of getting them to study with them. Most of the best 8 get recommendations, with Todoroki and Bakugo standing out by an astronomical margin. I'd say these scores are indicative of something else, but much like how the story calls itself out, the results are reversed. It's also missing the one that would split them up, but Deku didn't get a recommendation. Whether the student got a recommendation or not, everyone has a chance to work alongside a hero agency for their work studies, which brings us back to their hero names. Helping out with the class is Midnight. A hero's name is a symbol of who they are, a reflection of their true selves, so it's important to pick a good one even if it might end up changing later on. The kids come up with a bunch of fun names with fun critiques such as legal and human decency issues, and by the end of it only Midoriya and Ida are having a hard time deciding on their names. We cut back to Ida and his brother in the hospital room. He lost all feeling in his legs in the accident and he wants his brother to take on his hero name, but the boy doesn't feel ready to take it. Midoriya, on the other hand, shocks the class with his hero name. It's one that's been with him for the longest time, but just recently its meaning has changed to him. He is now officially Deku. Meanwhile, in the staff room, another student recommendation comes in and it's for Deku. All Might's so shocked his eyes turn into Asana characters. Look at that big ol' mono eyeshadow. The kids start picking from the available agencies that scouted them and from the selection the school made up for them. Different places handle different crimes depending on the disposition and location. Tsuyu would like to go somewhere with flooding and Kirishima wants to do some battle in the city. Makes sense, but Ochako, who expressed wanting to do rescue, says that she's going to one of her recommendations, the battle hero, Gunhead. She's using her loss to Bakugo as a jumpstart on trying new things to round herself out to handle different situations. By the end of class, Midoriya still hasn't made his pick, so he's lucky that All Might comes bearing good news. All Might had another teacher who personally came to UA for a year to be his homeroom teacher, just like he did for Midoriya, Gran Torino, someone from a generation before All Might and who had once retired but now regains his name to teach his pupil's pupil. All Might is terrified, so I'm sure the boy will have a good time. In no time at all, everyone has filled out their picks and are ready to go, with Ida picking a very familiar place of work. As the kids depart, Deku and Ochako fret over their clearly still disheartened friend, telling him that they're free to talk at any time. He smiles with a distant look in his eyes and agrees, but his face and the narration prepare us for tragedy that is soon to come. Midoriya makes his way to the agency and is surprised by how broken down it looks. He peers inside and finds a dead body. Wait, no, it's just an old man who fell on some sausages. A seemingly senile old man at that. Feeling put off, the boy tries to escape to call All Might, but the man suddenly gets serious and tells him to give him his best shot. Now that things have cooled off and heated back up for our next arc, let's do some more overview. This connecting section is ominous. As said before, the ending of the last arc was bittersweet, and I feel like what stayed with us the longest has been the bitter. Much like how Todoroki's story was interspliced with his classmates' jokes, or during the rest period with their anxious faces, this time we constantly have Ida to worry about in the back of our minds, even if we're doing silly things like getting hyped over picking names and characters slowly trying to come into their own. But that, in my opinion, is good suspense. You know something's going to happen, and you can probably guess what will, but it's that sense of how bad is it going to get is what keeps you on your toes. Everything about the way Ida is drawn gives you this tragedy incoming vibes. Look at those shadows. The next chapter starts with All Might and Tsukauchi talking about the captured Nomu. As described, it's a man-made bioweapon that has no will of its own, but it has the DNA of multiple people inside it. However, that alone wouldn't let someone use multiple quirks. Tsukauchi tells All Might this because he's the only other person who shares a quirk with someone else. Midoriya, on the other hand, is getting a hard-learned lesson from Gran Torino. The boy's new costume, Beta, does nothing for him. Literally, it does nothing for him at all. Looks cool though. The boy can't land a hit on the elderly man and is told that he's still treating One for All as something special. It's up to him to figure out what that means. On the flip side, Stain, the hero killer, is hearing out the League of Villains. You know the spiel, kill All Might, beat up children, we were there the first time. Stain's not impressed. In fact, he feels insulted at Shigaraki's childlike mentality. A fight's about to break out, but the man behind the monitor seems pleased. This too is a learning experience. The mirror continues to reflect as we return to Deku, who tries to think through his use of One for All. His mentality is too stiff and his idea of loosening up comes in the form of Bakugo. Instead of thinking of One for All as some last-ditch super move, he needs to use it normally like everyone else does. Gran Torino listens in, proud of both of his pupils. The next chapter starts with checking up on the other students. Bakugo decided to join Best Jeanist' agency because he's within the top 5 heroes of Japan, but that Denim Man has other plans for our boy than fighting crime. Kirishima is teamed up with Tetsu, and Momo is eager to learn anything she can, even if it's not directly related to hero work. It's a nice bit of catching up and world building on how heroes operate. Deku, on the other hand, decides to sneak out for some extra training. His first task is to try and wall jump like Mega Man X. You know, this is also a gaming channel, so I'm really doing my best to not talk about the logistics of this 15-year-old boy playing Mega Man X within this splintered technological timeline of a series. Jeez, must have played it on his virtual console. Well, he tries his best, but at the end of it all, he ends up in the garbage. He talks about it with Gran Torino the next day and is told that this is the real hard part. Deku is different from All Might, who naturally got used to the power on his own. As their conversation goes on, Gran Torino realizes that All Might also hasn't talked to Deku about his own predecessor much. The two try to have breakfast with the new microwave because someone broke the other one yesterday. Midoriya messed up the taiyaki, but because of that, he gets a hint on how to use his powers. His past training was all about moving the energy to certain parts of his body when he needed them, but this time he'll spread the energy throughout, like a microwave rotating to spread the energy. Once again, the microwave comes in to save the day. He and Gran Torino decide that a short test run is in order while the idea is still fresh, and while it's still a bit difficult to get a grasp on, Deku manages to land a scratch on his mentor with his new full cowl. Cowling? Cowling isn't a bad translation, but I just don't like it. Why is it a verb now? The mirror reflects once again to show us how things are going with Shigaraki, and he's not doing too hot. Stain gives his speech about corrupt society and fake heroes once again, but this also stands for pompous villains. Not only does he see Shigaraki as an immature brat, but also someone without a concrete ideal for himself. The man-child agrees, but his desires of crushing All Might and the society that praises him are good enough for the hero killer. It seems that that form of conviction and shared desire to stake up the status quo is enough to work together with the League of Villains. At least for a while. After coming to terms, the man requests to be returned to Hos. Let's break things up for now before the action catches us by surprise. This is the first real training arc. Arcs like this can be a mixed bag depending on how the author wants to tackle it. Are they trying to master a specific technique, or are they trying to develop something more abstract like a style or a different way of thinking? My Hero Academia really likes playing with the latter, so instead of gradual repetition, you get bursts of inspiration. Every mentor has a strong think for yourself stance, and in a world where everyone has a special power of their own, it makes sense. But this type of teaching can also promote character growth, like how Deku thinks differently of his quirk, or reinforcement of mentality like Shigaraki clarifying himself to Stain. Obviously we follow Deku most of the time, but for the rest of his classmates we mostly get a bunch of world building. Shigaraki shows up to get a little kick in the ass, but it's also to set up for the plot of this arc. Ida, on the other hand, seems to be one step away from a downward spiral. On the third day, Deku has worked out fighting with Gran Torino enough for the old-timer to set his goals on some actual villains and accidents. They aren't in a very populated area, so to find some action, they decide to take themselves to the bustling city of Shibuya. They have to pass right by Hosu, and the boy thinks of his friend who is also out on patrol. Manuel is Ida's mentor and he can read him like a book. He calls the boy out on why he even decided to pick his agency in the first place. He tells Ida straight out that he shouldn't let a grudge take hold of him. If he were to act out of anger, it wouldn't be any different than vigilantism. Heroes can't make arrests and they can't dole out punishments. They can only act in times of crisis, and even then those actions are reviewed by the government. He empathizes with the boy but wants him to stay out of trouble. But if he does nothing, then what would Ida do with all those emotions? Stain and the others arrive back in Hos, and he says that he has more work to do before he can leave the city. Shigaraki doesn't like this small-time attack, but Kurogiri refutes the man in that his actions get his desired results of culling the crime rate and sharpening the heroes. Shigaraki scoffs at the idea of improving heroes at all, and decides to co-opt Stain's chaos by spreading his own with more Nomus. Deku and Gran Torino are riding along a train right by Hosu, and wouldn't you know it, a Nomu crashes right into it. Gran Torino takes the Nomu away and tells Deku to stay put, but we know that's not going to happen. With chaos covering all of Hos, Manuel and Ida have to figure out exactly where it's coming from, but oh no, another coincidence. It looks like Deku's not the only one who's not following orders. The hero killer is busy living up to his namesake, and he too is suspicious of what Shigaraki is planning. He plans to deal with it afterwards, but a surprise attack from Ida will be holding things up. Unfazed and uninterested, Stain tells him to leave, but he is the whole reason Ida is even here. Seeing his thirst for revenge, Stain gives him one final warning to leave, but Ida declares that he is there to stop him, as Ingenium. Gran Torino is putting up a good fight with the Nomu, but it manages to slip away. Luckily, a well-known fire hero seems to be in town hunting for the hero killer. Deku, out looking for Gran Torino, manages to find the center of the chaos, but finds out that Ida has also gone missing. He racks his brain and comes to the logical conclusion on what that boy might be doing and where he might be. Ida, on the other hand, is having a horrible time dealing with the hero killer. He's outmatched in every way. Stain tells him that he and his brother were just too weak to be true heroes. But Ida remembers the times he spent watching his brother, and it seems that remark could never be true. At least, not for the older sibling. Stain tells Ida that instead of focusing on trying to kill him, he should have been focused on saving the person in front of him. It's because of this selfish action that he's going to die, but Deku doesn't agree with that and manages to save his friend at the last second. Ida wonders how Deku managed to find him, and the answer is simple. He used his big nerd brain full of hero and villain knowledge. He asks Ida to run for help, but he's been immobilized by the hero killer's quirk. Even so, the paralyzed boy asks his friend to not get involved. Stain is slightly impressed with Deku's temperament, and once again gives a child a life or death ultimatum. Deku's taken aback by such focused and serious killing intent, and decides that there's no alternative. No matter what, he'll have to fight to protect the two that are there. To quote All Might, giving help that's not asked for is what makes a true hero. Stain is fully intrigued and ready to engage the boy who comes straight at him. The exchange is quick with Deku managing to land a hit, but it was unfortunately an unequal trade. Stain managed to get a cut in, and with just a drop of blood, him ingesting it is enough to paralyze the boy. Impressed with him, Stain decides to leave Deku alone and returns to trying to kill Ida, but he is once again suddenly stopped by an attack of fire and ice. Todoroki arrives just in time. It seems Deku managed to send out his location data to his friends, and that was enough for Todoroki to figure out what was going on, and he was close enough to come and help. He manages to keep the hero killer at bay with his fire and retrieves the hostages with his ice. Now it's just a matter of waiting for help to arrive, but the hero killer is single-minded and skilled. He almost manages to get Todoroki, but the boy is a good matchup for the close quarters specialist. The boy does his best to keep the man at bay, but ends up almost getting outplayed. Just as he's about to get slashed, Deku regains movement and comes to his assist. They deduce that Stain's quirk is limited by blood type. He even converts it for them because knowing it doesn't really give them an advantage. It's still a fight for time. While assisting Deku, Todoroki starts thinking about Ida. He'd been watching him since he heard about Ingenium because the class president started to remind him of himself. It was only after facing his mother and seeing how much she had changed could he start changing. He decided to mentor under his father and learn everything he could about being a hero from the second best. On the other hand, Ida is eaten up by his own guilt, putting his friends in danger for his own selfishness. But Todoroki tells him the lesson that he had once forgotten. Never forget who you want to become. Once again, Ida remembers his brother, respected by both his parents and sidekicks. Someone who is super cool, but is motivated by an act as simple as helping a lost child. Most proud of being respected by his talented little brother. Ida accepts that he is who the hero killer claims him to be, but he chooses to stand again to protect his friends and to be as heroic as they and his brother are. He apologizes in earnest and promises to protect them. Stain isn't impressed. He says that people can't change and no matter what, he's the same as every other fake hero. Ida can't fully refute this, but he still has to try, because if he doesn't, then Ingenium will have truly died. There's still no chance for escape, so they can only push forward. With Stain on defense, it's now or never. Ida blocks for Todoroki as the boy cools down his legs. Meanwhile, Deku manages to get back up. And with an unplanned combination, they are able to split the killer's attention enough for both of them to land a clean hit. Deku pushed it a bit past his limit, but Ida lands another attack in combination with Todoroki. The boys are still full of adrenaline, but after a second, they realize that they've managed to win. Elsewhere, the adults are still cleaning up the rampaging Nomus. These ones happen to be weak enough for an old-timer like Gran Torino to take care of. Endeavor thinks back to when Shoto split off and asked Gran Torino to go to their location. He'll deal with the rest of them himself. The old man manages to meet up with the boys just as they come out the alleyway with Stain. They're even joined by other heroes who came from the center of the city. Ida apologizes once more, but they are caught off guard by another from the center of the chaos. A flying Nomu escaped the carnage and decided to take Deku for a ride. Before the monster gets out of reach, however, Stain escaped his bindings and managed to paralyze the Nomu and kill it. he won't forgive villains as much as he won't forgive fake heroes. Endeavor managed to catch up and zeroes in on a hero killer. Just before he's able to make a mistake, Stain turns around and howls his beliefs. Someone needs to be soaked in blood. He needs to take back what it means to be a hero. He'll take on all comers because the only one allowed to kill him is All Might. And with that, he falls silently unconscious but standing in the end. Todoroki, watching on the rooftops, is frustrated by his plans being ruined on all sides by everyone he seems to hate, but he retreats after all is said and done, and will wait to see how the public will react. The next day, the boys rest up at the local hospital. They're amazed at how they managed to survive. Midoriya and Todoroki appreciate their luck with how the hero killer wasn't trying to kill them, and commend Ito for standing up to that man's actual bloodlust. They're visited by Gran Torino, Manuel, and one more guest, the Chief of Police, Suragamae Kenji. You know what, I know about Domo-kun, so I'm not gonna wonder why this obvious McGruff reference is here. I'm just glad Deku reacts the same way as me. Wolf? He gives us a brief history lesson. At the dawn of quirks, the police decided to keep the status quo by forbidding quirk use in the force. The authorization of heroes was criticized, but because of their morality to comply with the laws, things went over smoothly. It's because of that when people do break the laws, they have to be held accountable, even with situations like the hero killer. Todoroki gets a little heated. If it weren't for all of them fighting, someone would have died. He asks if they should have just let them die for the sake of the law. He gets so mad he pulls a Bakugo by calling the chief a mud. Gran Torino steps in and the chief continues. That last speech was as the chief of police. As a one person to another, there is the option of brushing things under the rug and let Endeavor take all of the credit. Their mentors will still face a bit of punishment, but the boys will get off with just a scolding. He knows it's not the same, but the chief gives them his deepest gratitude for their efforts. We catch up with media coverage of the incident and shift around the other students and their situations, some unaware while others glad that Midoriya is okay after checking back on his SOS. Shigaraki is steamed that his rampaging Nomus are just a footnote in the coverage of the captured Stain. Checking back with Ida and Todoroki, we find out that Ida has suffered some light but permanent damage to his left hand. There's a chance to fix it with surgery, but he decides to leave it until he feels he's become a true hero. The time for apologies is over, and Deku holds out his scarred right hand and pledges that they'll get stronger together. Well, there's one more apology that needs to be made. Todoroki breaks up this solemn moment with a sudden realization. The chronicles of the Hand Crusher may also continue with his friends. Gran Torino gives All Might a call to complain about his disobedient pupil. The two just seem to be the same in their worst and best ways. But the real reason he called was to talk about Stain. The hero killer managed to even put the old veteran on edge, and his strong ideology reminded him of All Might's symbol of peace bid. If his charisma and beliefs can stir up villains the way All Might does for heroes, it could be bad. Then there's his connection to the League of Villains. A dark beacon has been lit. Gran Torino thinks that this was all planned. He thinks the same person who planned all of this is the same person who killed All Might's predecessor and his dear friend Shimura, who put that hole in Toshinori's stomach. All for One is on the move. He urges Toshinori to talk to Midoriya about himself and One for All. We cut to the underbelly of society and listen in on some villain talk about how it was better in the old days before All Might, and how it's hard to get by when even some licensed support agencies are selling out of their back doors. One of them brings up a video that documents Stain's life, a boy with dreams to be a hero, but was disillusioned by only stepping foot into hero education. He had always preached of his self-sacrificing ideals, and after a while he took the matter into his own deadly hands. Everything is going as Gran Torino predicted. Evil is on the move. What an arc. New characters, a full character arc, and some continuations on the last one we went through. The Hero Killer arc is probably the first major turning point of our story. If the USJ event was an unexpected surprise, this is a fully set up joyride. It's these types of intimidating villains that will be holding up this story. Stain's ideology contrasts well to Shigaraki's almost basic instinct to destroy, but because both of their cores lies in destruction, they get to play off each other, and because for how Grand Stain thinks of his own ideas, his actions being no better or short-sighted than Shigaraki's is the icing on top. It's purposely undercut by his first act of attacking Tensei. Heck, he's undercut by using All Might as his measuring stick because for as great as he is, the man is flawed in his own ways, Chapter 1's character low point aside. Now, you'd think that would be bad. Why would he be discredited so fast? But as stated earlier, he's right. But in the wrong way, and it's not even about killing people. It's super easy to agree with his thinkings coming off of Todoroki's backstory in the last arc. The very person who wants to kill him agrees with his base ideals, but Stain doesn't seem to know anything about the people he's actively killing most of the time. He doesn't know that Endeavor is an a-hole to his family, he doesn't know anything about Tensei, and all he knows about Tenya was what was in the moment, and that's not the true Ida that we've come to know. It was a boy in a time of weakness, and he overcame it despite the man's ravings. And speaking of our star, Ida is the purest form of character writing wrapped up in a single arc bow. Something happened to him. His brother was attacked. He decided to do something about it. Hunt the hero killer. Full stop. His emotions caused him to take his actions too far, but by the end of it, he was able to truly live up to the person he wanted to become. No extra baggage like a horrible crippling character flaw or a sad backstory. Just acting and reacting to the story as it comes and progresses. Full stop. He regressed to a person we never thought we'd see him as, and having his friends be the one to pull him back and still using this experience to better himself. Todoroki is also a good supplement for Ida's character and for his own arc as well. He used his past experience to help his friends, and it's nice to see him try to make progress with his father to carry out his own dreams. Deku's growth on the other hand is more practical. He managed to use his quirk more efficiently, and his own introspection is contrasted with Shigaraki's. I made all of those mirror metaphors for a reason. Deku is mostly emotional support for the climax, an echo through Todoroki, and an open hand to Ida. There's a bit more to be said, but let's leave that for the end of the video. The work studies has come to an end, and Midoriya gives Gran Torino his thanks and goodbyes, but the boy has been wondering something. For as strong as Gran Torino is, he's pretty unknown. The man tells him that he got his license for his own reasons, and he gives us one last bit of acting asking for the boy's name. Our protagonist states himself as Deku, and Gran Torino thinks that with enough help, the boy can become the next symbol of peace. Until we meet again, little gremlin Yoda man. Back in class, the kids share their experiences, trainings, evacuations, smugglers, horrible life realizations, and naturally the conversation turns to the trio who fought off the hero killer. Kaminari mouths off a bit too much, but it managed to motivate Ida to continue to do his best, and the Sparky boy feels at least a little bad about what he said. It's time for class to start, and this time it's rescue training. The first one to the distress signal is the winner. Everyone's excited to see how the others have improved, and Deku is the underdog of his group, but now it's time to surprise everyone with his new technique. Some of them even know who he's emulating. He even does pretty well for half a slip, but slip he does. All Might is proud of the boy and wants to have a private conversation. First we get a little catch up on the things that happened with Stain. For our perceptive viewers, we get a further explanation on how One For All is passed down. DNA needs to be shared, but the transfer of power needs to be willed to the other person as well. That's why Stain isn't running around as an all-powerful Superman. What comes next is an exploration of the origin of the quirk itself. One For All was created by another quirk, All For One, an ability that can steal quirks and then pass those on to others. At the advent of the exceptional, the idea of what it meant to be seen as human suddenly collapsed and the population was full of unrest. There existed a man who would steal quirks and manipulate the populace for his own wicked deeds and would soon take over the country. All For One was that man, gaining trust and forcing others to submit by taking and granting quirks. but for people who gained too many, they would lose their sense of self and become a mindless puppet, just like our past Nomus. However, there was one time where that wasn't the case. The man had a powerless little brother who didn't agree with his ideals. Whether to get the brother to submit or a warped act of kindness, he ironically gave him a quirk that stockpiles power. However, unknown to the both of them at the time, the brother had an unknown but completely worthless quirk on its own, the ability to pass on his quirk. The two combined, mutating into the current One for All. Deku is surprised by such a tale but wonders why All Might brings it up now. All Might further explains that someone who can steal any ability would naturally go after one that would halt the aging process in some form. For generations, people had passed down One for All in an attempt to stop the man. All Might thought he had finished off the fight once and for all, but it seems that that wasn't the case. One for All was created to defeat All for One, and in the future, it may be Deku's time to finally bring him the justice. Even in the face of a daunting reality, Deku is confident that with All Might by his side, he can take on anything. But sorrowfully, All Might doesn't think he will last that long. Back in class, the kids get prepared for their summer vacation. As these kids are practically going to a trade school, they have a planned summer training camp. They're all excited for the fun time and new practice experience, but to make sure everyone can go, they have to all do well on their final term exams. But while our future heroes are getting pumped for their next challenge, our villains are getting giddy for their own disciple and plans. A while later, the kids are starting to worry about their impending exams. Some of them get together to study in groups, but they still have to worry about the practical exams as well. Word through the grapevine, however, tells them that they should just be battling exercise robots again, and the children put all of their mental energies into the written exam. Well, except for one. Bakugo is still holding a grudge from the sports festival, and seeing Deku make strides to improve himself has put him on edge. He declares that he'll be using these tests to prove once again the difference between them. The time comes and everyone feels comfortable with their written performance. The practical exams, however, has changed formats from before. The teachers feels that with more villains attacks happening, it would be better to test the kids themselves. Simulated villain battles with them as the villains, and the kids matched up in pairs, and of course Deku and Bakugo have to be on a team. Our small transition is over, so let's look back before we get into the final act of this video. In this moment of downtime, we get a large plot dump of a chapter. We learn a bit more of the advent of our current society and the actions that led us here. Of course some of the people would protest, and someone would pounce on the opportunity to manipulate the downtrodden. The big surprise is that they're still around to this day. We get some small world building tidbits like Deku hearing about all of this online but not in any of his textbooks, or how they would be enjoying interstellar travel if not for the change in society. I feel like that last line is more of a throwaway joke and a lampshading of the robots, but it does help differentiate this world from ours in a technological level. No solid dates are given, and other than those robots, their world is pretty much the same as ours tech-wise. You know, hero gear notwithstanding. Though that would lead into other technological improvements. But I think on a more important level we learn more about One for All, truly the quirk to beat all others. Even in this explanation, it works differently than every other quirk, managing to mutate instead of leaving the holder comatose. But maybe that's an inherited ability of its holder, or maybe the passing down quirk power in and of itself. But even at the time I was like, so you really can't use those other quirks in there, huh? All for One can take and move quirks around and still use them for himself. Why can't ours do that? It's weird. The only thing left are character bits, but let's deal with those as they continue during the arc. The children split off into pairs and head off into their own battle areas. They get these fun fighting game versus screens as a treat, and this school really has to be the size of at least a small city by now. We learn that all the children are paired up specifically to push them to their limits, physically and mentally. Todoroki is paired up with Yaoyorozu because she's been silently dealing with a lack of confidence in the background since the last third of the sports festival. And Deku and Bakugo are paired up because they are literally the worst pair. Guess whose fault that is? To keep things fair for the kids, they can choose to battle and shackle their instructor, or make an escape to the area's exit where only one needs to escape for them to pass. An extra bonus is that the teachers are wearing special weights to slow them down, patented by Hatsume Mei. The children have 30 minutes to pass. The alarm rings and both students and teachers alike are on the move with their own plans, except for one pair. Deku and Bakugo can't seem to agree on how to handle All Might. One wants to fight and the other wants to escape, but one of them is being worse than the other about it. Every time I come back to these scenes, I remember that the anime had the other kids watching. It makes this slap come off way worse. Either way, the two boys just can't seem to get through to each other, and All Might has had enough and makes his presence known. Once again getting into his roleplay, All Might charges at the boys, and Bakugo, wanting to prove himself, charges right back. The feral boys got spunk, but that's not enough to topple the encumbered symbol of peace. Deku on the other hand is having Stain flashbacks and loses his sense of spacing. The two boys just aren't looking out for each other. It seems like a basic case of water and oil, but there's something deeper hidden under the surface. Bakugo still tries to move on his own, saying that heroes always win in a fight, and once again Deku tries to concede a bit with the boy, but All Might pins the green lad down, separating them. Deku has a flashback remembering what it is about All Might that Bakugo respects so much as the man deals with the boy in question, asking why he's trying so hard and that comparing himself to Deku is meaningless when their starting lines are so different. He tells him that Bakugo's form of growth shouldn't be measured by gaining power, and Deku echoes those points to himself. Even if Bakugo is a jerk, his tenacity for winning is inspiring. But the boy at his absolute lowest spits on both of their sentiments. He'd rather lose than work with Deku. All Might is willing to let him lie in that bed he just made, but Deku rushes to wake him up with a crack across the face. Deku tells him off for saying such a thing and gets the two out of there to regroup. Deku asks Bakugo to think of at least using him to win before giving up, and we get a slightly longer flashback of a time where the child managed to beat up some older bullies by himself. We cut back to All Might on the lookout for the hidden boys and is suddenly snuck up upon by Bakugo. This page doesn't even try to pretend that the boy is the same as he grits his teeth and calls Deku in for backup. Bakugo Katsuki. Origin. Deku lines up his shot and thinks through their plan. It's a simple combination of both of their wants. Shoot him with a giant shot and then run away while he's down. They even minimize the damage to the area that he already caused to the city. This is still a test after all. All Might expected them to break down, but to build themselves back up like this brings a smile to his face. This is a clear step in the right direction for the both of them, but it's only a single step. And while we're in the middle of a new chapter, we've reached the emotional climax for these two, so let's talk about it. Remember in the last video where I said Bakugo's line in the sand is Deku? This arc is where that made me confident in saying that. We go through the sports festival and Bakugo starts getting closer to his classmates and starts taking them seriously, but now that it's time to work together with Deku, let's completely give up. I called it a line, but let's call it what it really is, a gigantic wall to overcome, but this boy is too petty to even try first. Deku has to be the one to burst a hole in the wall for him to even get to the other side, just like their battle training. You get a bit of feeling that the flashback with the school kids was shared between the both of them. A feeling that they both know that he's better than what he's acting as. Hearing other characters talk about the both of them can feel kinda weird because they bring up their lack of teamwork when only one of them is having a hard time, but I think this is done to try and put the both of them on the same level and always focus on the relationship itself than specifically one of them. But when things do need to be said or addressed, they still are. Aizawa clearly points Bakugo out for getting a worse attitude, and All Might specifically has a chat with Bakugo himself. As I stated earlier, Deku's the one that has to force things to be even. He doesn't even have a problem, but he also doesn't speak up for himself enough. He'd rather avoid or appease Bakugo than clearly say what he wants, and because Bakugo is so hard-headed, it can just turn into a shouting match half the time. Now obviously, because this is a story full of action and drama, a good punch across the cheek is an equalizer that Bakugo needs to understand how serious the other boy is being. But that punch is a good mirror to what happened earlier, but with different context. Hitting to shut someone up is different from hitting to get someone to listen. It's always been happening like this. Both Bakugo and Midoriya resorted to destroying the building in their first training, both of them jumping out to save All Might at USJ, both of them having expectations of Todoroki. For two people so similar, they don't look eye to eye with one another, and that makes sense. They have their own strengths, weaknesses, and different values, and that's what trips them up. The scene of them running away spells it all out. So while Deku doesn't have an issue with Bakugo, just like the blonde swallowing his pride and accepting Deku's help, Deku finally forces the boy to see him as his equal. Well, equal might be too strong of a word. Bakugo at least would never say that out loud. But on with the chapter, we pivot to the Todoroki and Yaoyorozu team. Being up against Aizawa means keeping a close eye on their quirks activating. Momo seems impressed with Todoroki's simple plan, but more so it seems that she's disappointed in her own actions stemming back to the sports festival. While I've omitted mentioning these moments for the sake of time, if you've been watching her closely after her match, she starts spiraling downward, taking any chance she can to prove herself with gusto and personal backhanded comments. While lost in thought, Eraser gets a drop on his students and manages to capture Todoroki, lecturing him the whole way. But his main criticism is that the two-toned boy didn't bother to let his partner fully express herself. He makes his way towards Yaoyorozu, but his quirk runs out just in time for her to make a break back to Todoroki. The Shaggy Sensei is fully aware of his student's self-confidence issues and how she compares herself to the other class's recommended student, but now isn't the time to take care of her. Yaoyorozu makes her way back to Todoroki, making excuses the minute she gets there, but the boy cuts to the chase and asks her if she has a plan ready. Wading through more apologies and more self-doubt, the boy gets the last words in by telling her that he thinks she's best suited to coming up with plans than he is. He brings up that during the vote for the class president, he gave her one of his votes because she was good at analyzing. With the boost of confidence from the person who she saw herself as less than, she puts into action her backup plan she made at the very start. She gets Todoroki down and the two of them dash off to make space. Using what she learned from their last confrontation, she knows that Eraser's quirk is a bit dampened from his fight in USJ. They wait long enough for Todoroki to be able to blast off a fully powered ice attack to make a wall and buy them some time. Now that things have cooled off, now that things have heated up, Yaoyorozu is already putting her next steps into motion. Considering their situation, they only have one option. The plan is to take him down. On the other side of the wall, the sensei is laying in wait for them to make a move. He sees the pair of cloaks hobbling to the side and goes in for the kill, only to get outplayed again, and again, and again. Using her teacher's binding as a template, she surrounds him in a nitinol alloy wrapping, and Todoroki heats it up to shrink it back to its original size, binding their sensei. Yaoyorozu wonders if their teacher went a little easy on her when she missed her catapult the first time, but he says that jumping back was the right choice when he still couldn't clearly see Todoroki. Her plan was perfect. Him being a big softie was probably when he let her go the first time when he lectured Todoroki, but who can say? The Yaoyorozu Todoroki team are the first to pass, and everyone else gets to hear it to get their butts in gear. Some of them aren't doing too well though, especially our Wonder Duo. Once again, let's cut away to analyze. As I said before, I haven't been focusing on Yaoyorozu, and hopefully I've been inserting images of her feeling down while I've been going over the plot. I'd say her writing has been fairly subtle up until the finals where it's brought to a head. A small slow build-up that can be really appreciated on a second reading. Feeling disappointed by her quick loss to Tokoyami, not feeling fulfilled from her work studies. When you look at it like that, her arc resembles Bakugo's, but they handle it in very different ways. Momo will put someone above herself while Bakugo would never dream of doing that. She's also willing to listen to that person's opinion, and because she holds them in high regards, those words mean something. It's funny how Todoroki's straightforward and blunt personality leans into their interactions. Momo respects that in him, and it's probably because of that him saying he voted for her means so much. To Todoroki at the time, that vote probably didn't mean much, but because he is who he is, he still means what he did and what he said. I also like how Aizawa gets excited for his students' growth and is constantly commenting on their actions. He's as doting as All Might, but with less of the violence. And speaking of All Might and violence, he's committing a lot of it. Once again, having the anime have other people watch this battle makes it feel worse than what it actually is, and that's on top of the anime's added extensions and flash to the scenes. There's a small quip at the start where the teachers said that they use robots because they got flack for fighting the students themselves. All Might is proving them right. I blame Gran Torino. This is generational. With their plan going up in smoke, the only thing left is for recklessness. Bakugo fires off his strongest blast like shown in the sports festival. He tosses Deku roughly towards the gate, but All Might is still playing a strong offense. Bakugo fires off another large blast, even though doing so without his gear is painful, but if that's what it takes, then so be it. All Might quickly puts a stop to this reckless behavior, remembering what happened to Deku, but Bakugo says that if he wants to fight like that, then it's his choice, because he has to do everything possible to win. All Might is lost for words, and when he regains himself, he looks off for Midoriya, but the boy is already upon him and punches him off Bakugo with everything he has. The boy feels bad about not getting away, but the two's combined strength was just enough to slow All Might down so they could both make it out of the gate together. The number one hero looks on with pride at how much his successor has grown. The next chapter cuts to the healing tent, and All Might is getting an earful for almost cracking his pupil's back. He was ordered to carry them all to the actual nurse's office, but Deku decides to stay and take notes. Deku manages to figure out the purpose of these tests pretty quickly. Tokoyami and Tsuyu are up against ectoplasm to exploit Tokoyami's weakness to close-range combat by outnumbering him, and Tsuyu, who has no obvious weaknesses, was there for support. With a bit of teamwork and a sleight of hand, the two managed to pass the exam even at a disadvantage. Giant Bite looks so cool. Kaminari and Ishido aren't doing too hot against the principal, while Jiro and Koda are also having a tough time against a rather lazy present Mike. Koda is out of commission because most of the animals in the area are too afraid by their teacher's booming voice, and Jiro's speakers aren't loud enough to cancel out the noise either. He finds an ant and wonders if Koda can command bugs, but he seems too scared to bother. It's only after seeing Jiro get hurt from standing up to their teacher's attacks does he gain the courage to overcome his fear of insects and orders them to burrow under the ground to avoid the sound waves and disgust him into a KO. We rush past more students, some pass, some struggle, and some become aware of certain feelings. That's gonna be something later. But on to the Loveless, Mineta is having a rough time. Sarah was already KO'd the first time we cut to them, and the Great Boy seems to be ready to give up. The other team's passing makes him feel a little cornered. He only wanted to become a hero to become more popular with girls, but all of these trials, planned or not, weren't what he was expecting. Lost in thought, the cornered prey meets his predator. One sniff of Midnight's aroma will put him to sleep. The boy tries to make space and admits that his ideals were wrong. Being a hero won't make you cool. They're heroes because they're already cool. Complaining and running away was all a trap to lure Midnight away from the exit and Sero. With a bit of the boy's tape in his own sticky balls, Mineta is able to restrain his instructor and carry his partner through the exit. With that, time runs out and two pairs fail to pass their practical exam. But while the students recoup from their brutal tests, the mirror flips and the villains are once again making a move. It seems Kurogiri pulled some strings to get a meeting with League of Villain hopefuls. Toga Himiko, a high school girl who's a person of interest in a string of bloodletting deaths. There's no hard evidence to prove that she's the one who killed those people, but she probably did it though. She wants to join because life's too hard. She wants to become the Great Staney. She wants to kill the Great Staney. Shigaraki and I are both confused, so let's move on to the next person. Someone with no real crime record, but he wants to make Stain's ideals a reality. He goes by Dabi. Can't even give his real name. You'll know when you need to. Don't go staring into the fourth wall too hard there. Shigaraki is unimpressed by their lack of manners and for their admiration of Stain. Heck, I'd say he's downright upset about it. But Kurogiri tries to talk him down to accept any help that they can get from anywhere, including Stain's reputation. The itchy man-child decides to leave the conversation and walks out on all of them. Kurogiri reassures the others that Shigaraki will come up with an answer for both them and himself in a few days. Losing to both heroes and villains would make someone pretty salty. It's a new day and the students are waiting to hear back on their test results. Well, everyone but Zero is pretty sure how they did. The failures are just waiting for their execution, but in a surprise turn of events, even the failing pairs will join on the training camp. Again, these kids are practically learning a trade. What kind of school would let them not learn? But this compromise says a lot about the training camp, and then you add on the extra lessons that they have to take on as well. SOL these failures are. But they're at least glad they get to go and be with everyone else. The whole class is excited and most of them decide to go shopping together to get ready for their trip. They go to the biggest mall in the ward and everyone is biting at the bits to get their things that they quickly splinter off into groups. Deku and Ochako are left alone, but someone is in denial and can't deal with her own feelings. Left alone and confused, Midoriya is approached by some rando in the crowd. The kids are still well known from their sports festival, but this one seems to know more about the Hosu incident. In fact, these two might know each other a little bit better than mere strangers. Shigaraki Tomura took a walk to the mall to figure out what's bothering him so much about Stain. The people around him don't seem to have a care in the world, even if other peoples are being hurt somewhere else. Stain gets more recognition than he does, even from people who the man would consider a cancer. Shigaraki luckily runs into Midoriya and feels that the boy could answer his questions on what makes him and Stain so different. With threats of civilian violence keeping the boy in place, the two take a seat. Shigaraki aimlessly says that he hates everything, but what's bothering him now is the hero killer and how he's getting more recognition than him. To him, they're just doing the same thing and destroying the things that they don't like. Midoriya tells him that he doesn't agree with what either of them did, but he could at least understand the hero killer. It might be the fact that they're both enraptured with All Might. Stain had a belief that he stuck to even to the point of rescuing him. Shigaraki, on the other hand, just seems to want to have fun and would run away at the slightest sign of resistance. It seems Midoriya's words managed to clear things up for Shigaraki. The reason he hates Stain, the reason he's irritated by the boy, why all these people can walk around with dopey smiles on their faces. It's all because of All Might, because he's always smiling, because that man made a world where people think he can save everyone. Uraraka managed to gain enough denial to return to Deku, and with their conversation over, Shigaraki lets the boy go, but Deku has a question of his own. He wants to know what All for One is up to, but Shigaraki has no idea. He warns the boy that the next time they meet will mean that he's going to kill him. The man leaves the mall refreshed and motivated. He'll readily use the hero killer's name now, for the sake of his own desires. Nothing's really changed, but everything will be for the sake of creating a world without All Might and stepping on everything he stands for. Uraraka called the police and the mall was closed down for a search, but Shigaraki couldn't be found. Deku is escorted to the police station for questioning, but his testimony didn't give them much more information that they already had. All Might is waiting outside for him and is relieved that the boy is safe. Midoriya asks All Might if there was a time that he couldn't save anyone. The man answers that there are plenty of times like that. Even right now, someone is out there getting hurt. He's just a human who can't be everywhere at once, but that's the reason he smiles. To light the hearts of civilians, heroes, and even villains. Midoriya's mom comes to take him home, and All Might and Tsukauchi decide that this time, they'll take down All for One once and for all. So looked a little bit into chapter 70, but not enough to count. Went over a lot because the last half of these tests are just extra bits of character writing, but they still blends nicely into Shigaraki's encounter. The manga doesn't go out of its way to highlight every exam, but it does let some of them stand out on their own for about a chapter or a half to help its pace. While the stakes aren't their highest, the character writing makes up for it, with characters growing past their own shortcomings, or the reader finding out more about what motivates them. Is Koda's character moment that big? No, but it's nice. Is Mineta's that inspiring? No, but his growth and determination feel real, even if it's a bit of a joke. It's these small moments that endear us to the entire class that has been sprinkled out through these last 3 arcs. It can be argued that Shigaraki is the one that pushes his plot forward, and it's the reason I call this story character-driven, because Shigaraki himself tries to find meaning within his own actions. The children will run into their own trials and tribulations, but the League of Villains are clearly their own characters as well. Shigaraki himself being constantly put on the same level as our protagonist with his own teacher All for One. For this video, I really want to talk about character writing, establishing, changing, and refining. We have a base class of 20 students plus teachers, other classes, other pro heroes, and villains. Hate to break it to you, but if you were expecting every character to have the same amount of writing as our 4 main boys these arcs, that is actual nonsense. Shoot, one of them doesn't even get the same amount of writing as the other 3 moving forward. But for most of our class, if you watch them in the background and take some of the things they say to heart, a good chunk of them have a solid foundation of wants, beliefs, and character traits. Ojiro has a strong sense of fairness, Tsuyu is cool under pressure, and Hatsume is very career driven. Starting with establishment, let's go with character wants. Character wants basically set the plot for a character-driven narrative. Deku wants to be a hero, so through his and others' actions, he's either helped or hindered, externally or internally. Our characters' beliefs, or broadly the hows of getting what they want, further sets them apart. I want to pass the test by fighting All Might. I want to pass the test by running away from All Might. And then you have their whys, which generally makes up the character's backstory. I want to be popular. I want to win, despite my father, to make money. Then you add the spice of personality traits to round out your cast. However, not every character needs to be that fleshed out with all of these traits. Your 1 and 2 dimensional characters have to fit into places you need them to be. I would tier Mr. Native, Manuel, and Gran Torino like this, and while some would argue with me with that last place, either way, Gran Torino plays the part he needs to fine because these dimensions aren't hard definitions. But that's just establishment. Changing and refining go hand in hand because one basically promotes the other. Koda may have grown just a tiny bit, but it's held up by seeing how serious Jiro is in a pinch. Mineta shows us how wide shallowness can be, but how backing up your goals is just as important as what they are. When people think of the term character growth, they think of something positive, but this type of writing can also be negative. Your character just needs to have a fundamental change. Todoroki and Bakugo are pretty standard. Todoroki's backstory and Bakugo's glaring character flaw lay everything out for their character arcs moving forward. Bakugo's is interesting because he does change until he hits the wall called Deku, and Todoroki is interesting because he accepts that he needs to make a change and is doing his best to do so one step at a time. But then you reach characters that don't have internal flaws or a backstory that promotes their change. They're hit by an external force. Ochako runs into Bakugo and decides to branch out. Momo is beaten by Tokoyami and loses her confidence. Deku and Shigaraki sit firmly in reinforcement. Deku's character these arcs is pretty straightforward. He has his own mental hangups that morph his altruism into something negative at times, but through the act of just developing his power, he's able to deal with it for now. As for Shigaraki, the slight flashback lets us further understand his resentment, and it's not just All Might the man, but what he represents and how he shaped the world around him. About how Shigaraki lightly faced a tragedy that no one saved him from, being neglected by the world around him. But this aspect makes them the perfect mirror for each other. They both share this simple naivety on what makes a hero or a villain, and we join them in their road to realizing what that means to them and what they want to accomplish with that belief. But my favorite of this arc is Ida because he represents the most basic form of character writing. You have them react to the events of the story. Ida wanted to be a great hero like his brother, but when that brother falls, he starts to stray from that path to prove that his physical skills he had already learned were enough proof of how great his brother was. He loses himself in anger and starts forgetting the heroic spirit his brother gave him, which is why it's important that the chapter when he stood up again was titled Reingenium. He stands again when he fully embraces his core beliefs and becomes the person he wanted to be. No sad backstory or outstanding character flaw, but when one aspect of him is pushed to its limits, his admiration for his brother, it caused a character crisis, an internal conflict stressed by an external one. His run-in with Stain was something he pursued himself from the start. To say Ida didn't change at all would be dishonest. He changed into something he wasn't, but his actions shaped his story, and at the end of it all, he reaffirmed himself stronger than before. Simply negative change leading into positive reinforcement. On a broader narrative scale, if you ever want an early representation on what this story is and how it flows, these 3 arcs are the perfect representation. I feel like if you just read the prior one, or in the anime's case, just watched season 1, you could get a bit of misunderstanding on how the story flows and set yourself up for false pretenses. I would not summarize My Hero Academia as a story of an underdog boy who has to think on his feet while using a dangerous power to keep up with his peers while he goes through hero school. Instead, I would say, My Hero Academia is a story of a boy who got a late start to his dream of becoming a hero, where his journey will take him to the greatest hero school in the nation, and he has to learn to adapt to the ultimate power given to him to ward off the onslaught of coming evil. Now, you might argue that I just gave a longer description with more details from this video, but I feel that that description was apt for my last video as well. What I really wanted to change was the focus of those words to play with people's expectations. By the end of the sports festival, Deku proves himself to be on par with his exceptional peers, and the arc right after solidifies this aspect by him developing Full Cowl. The school, while important, is more so a tool and backdrop for these children to grow than a major focus of the plot of which is forced forward not through a syllabus, but the actions of our villains. But hey, I'm the one who covered 2 school arcs in this video, so what do I know, right? But coming into this story with the first description of an underdog story isn't inherently wrong. The problem arises when you can't adapt to the story further expressing itself. That being said, I think My Hero Academia wears its writing pretty firmly on its skin, from how it handles characters to overarching plot lines. My hottest take of this video is that from the start to the current chapters, I think the writing's been pretty consistent. Whether you think that's good or bad is your own opinion, but in terms of how everything moves, it feels about the same. One of people's current complaints with the current arc is that things are moving way too fast, but to me this series has always had a quick pace, especially compared to its contemporaries. As for the character writing, if I had to make a chart of internal to external conflict with our 4 main boys this arc, it would look something like this, and it doesn't really change at all through the story moving forward. And that's fine because their personal scales fluctuate with where they need to be as the story moves forward. It's full of small character moments that build up on our cast, and character wants that push our story forward, with themes on society to bind everything together. I definitely might be future analyzing a little bit, but the story has reached its full stride, and our next arc focusing on the training camp should be fun. Will I just follow the anime season format for the rest of these videos? This was kinda hard to get out. They cut them up pretty good, but honestly I wanted to stop this video by the end of the sports festivals, who knows? But until we meet again, mata ao, until we meet again.